All right, welcome everybody. Doing this video, I'm a little bit pissed off by it actually, but we'll cover that in a second. I was away yesterday, being tattooed, and I rushed up this morning to get this video done, just to provide kind of my thoughts to the market, and really because very early signs are kind of confirming the thought process that I was having yesterday. And kind of like my general thoughts on the market from where we are overall here into the early price action of since the open last night and through the early hours of Asia into this morning. So I want to cover off kind of like an overall look at the market on where we are right now, kind of talk about some of the thoughts and feelings that I've seen people sharing on Twitter, and then discuss kind of where I think the next steps are. The first thing I want to say is that I think overall the market is in a perfectly normal correction phase. The market is in a perfectly normal phase in which we're starting to see movement back off the highs. I think for BTC, yeah, sure, maybe a small divergence here between the highs. How effective they are in bull markets is pretty minimal, to be honest with you. We've already seen a correction here from the 99,000s down here of 9%. That's a pretty decent move down. You've got a couple of areas in here. You've either got this one that we've already tagged into, you've maybe got this one that's slightly underneath it, but really what you're talking about is this whole area here being some sort of defense point for BTC. Now, again, I'm not necessarily sure that means it's immediately going to go back up. And there's a couple of psychological reasons kind of for this region on why I believe that, basically 99K isn't the high of what we'll see here. And obviously the first one is just the psychological point of, I don't think we stop pre 100,000. I don't think we stop before we at least get through that number from either a stop loss or liquidity perspective. I just simply don't think that happens. It's too obvious, and I don't think it survives. And so I think anybody that's short from 99,000, I think obviously 100,000 is going to get run. You may still wish to be short, but I still believe that figure is going to be run. 9% correction, perfectly fine. We're bringing down the RSIs here on the higher time frame, and actually this is a great situation to be in. We've been in this overbought region now since the 5th of November. So we basically had 20 days of being in this overbought region. And the wonderful thing about RSI and trending environments is that it takes basically a couple of red candles and all of a sudden we're back down at the 50 level. And as you can see, that's where we are now from this 12-hour perspective. And typically speaking, since October, in and around this zone has been a very good bounce point for BTC on the 12-hour. So I think, again, with the 9% correction from the high, the fact we haven't run 100,000, I think there's probably a pretty good chance that we're nearing some sort of bottoming area for BTC through here. And then the other one to that, it really is on MSTR. Obviously, MSTR has had a pretty bad run since this high, since everybody's announcing that they're short on MSTR. We're down 37% from the high. But again, keeping very much in mind that this has run like an absolute monster. Even here from the 4th of November when election time, it's up 150% during that period of time. So to be down 37% from the fact that we've been up 150% in 3 weeks is still absolutely fine. Now, the other part of that is that I simply don't believe that everybody who has been so vocally short on MSTR is also going to have an easy time in terms of keeping this market and keeping their short positions open from where they are. Now, of course, when you're talking about larger people like Citron, sure, there's a very good chance that they're going to be keeping their shorts open. But when we're talking about the average person who's piled into the MSTR trade, simply don't think that they survive any upside on MSTR, which I still believe will happen to this market. So, you've got a situation where 100K on BTC, I simply don't believe that it survives. I don't believe that BTC won't run that level. It's way too obvious. It's way too obvious as a stop level. It's way too obvious for us to kind of make a move through. And then likewise, MSTR, I don't believe that everybody can be vocally short at the absolute pico top and therefore survive it. I just don't believe that that's the situation. Now, why I was in a rush to record this video and why I kind of wanted to get my thoughts out is because I think that this is the ETH outperformance leg. And so when we're starting to see ETH now have a pretty decent start to the day, I think that this is where the ETH outperformance leg comes. And the reason that I believe that is basically just because of the structure that's setting up on ETH through here. So when you look at the daily, this daily is not a divergence between these highs here. This daily is an RSI, which is still, we can refer to it as in motion. Okay, so it's not done enough to start trading back to the downside where we'd be happy there's a divergence at play. This is still very much in that uptrending, grinding up process. And therefore, I don't think that this, again, stops right here. I don't think that this situation is just going to kind of turn around in this region here and make its way back to the downside with a divergence, which is going to spell the way for 2,700. I think it's probably more likely that ETH actually has its rally from here. The majority of RSIs here through the weekly, you know, pretty much from the 4 hour now through 12 daily, 3-day weekly, are all set up for continuation higher here. So when I said before about I'm not sure BTC immediately returns to that 100K, it might do, but we might also see a period of kind of chop for BTC where ETH takes a bit of the driving seat. So I feel as though this is maybe the turning point for ETH to at least start to push into the 4K region, obviously as its initial target region. And then if something, you know, fundamentally changes in the environment, we start seeing that kind of increased institutional demand, then maybe we get that push into all-time highs. But from my perspective, I think that ETH now is in the position where it can take advantage of the BTC correction, maybe the BTC chop, and make its own independent push. And then obviously today as well, you've seen things like AAVE, which once again maintain a very, very good higher time frame structure. These are still super bullish charts here. AAVE with a daily reset here on the RSI, pushing towards its highs for the year. Monthly structure being very, very good for AAVE with a ton of room to the upside. Weekly still having a ton of room to make that impulse and push through here. I think that a lot of the ETH eco is also in a very good situation and a very good point here as well. So from my perspective, I think BTC isn't going to stop short of 100K. My personal belief has always been that we move significantly past 100K. So I don't think that, you know, a 10% correction after we've done a ridiculous percentage gain in the last 3 weeks is anything to be concerned about. I still think that the trend is very clear. And I still think that 100K runs. I think that 100K will be irrelevant. I think we'll push 115, 120K and kind of be up at that zone. I think that probably this time ETH has its little moment. I think that ETH is set up really, really nicely on the higher timeframes to take advantage of that. And obviously ETH ecosystem, I think, will perform very, very well as well. And obviously in line with BTC, I don't believe that MSTR allows people to short the Pico top and not have any panic or concern about their positioning. So overall, still see this as a very good opportunity to get on board with a lot of things. Obviously, alts have generally been weaker during this patch of time as well. So where we've seen BTC correcting 9%, we've seen alts that have been kind of more strongly hit. Another good example is PEPE here. So PEPE on the daily is already starting to get this RSI back down to the 50 level. No divergences present. I think we've got a far bigger concern on the markets, and especially BTC if we go here for the thought process. I think we've got a far bigger concern if this market starts making 3-day or weekly divergences than we do when there's really no sign of divergences anywhere else. You know, typically speaking, all BTC cycle tops have ended in prolonged divergences. And we know from kind of, you know, the original COVID rally and the movement to the upside there, that we started to see these continued bearish divergences here on the weekly through into the 60,000 region before we got our major correction. And again, I still believe that to be the case through here. I don't believe that we're going to be kind of, you know, stopping through here and then, you know, somehow that being it. So, as I said, I would look for signs of weekly or 3-day weakness, but I don't think that anything we've seen so far is cause for concern in terms of the overall trend. I think that this still carries on. Seasonality for December obviously is a very positive time for the markets in general, although starts typically far later in December. But as I said, for now, I think everything's very good. And I also believe that ETH will probably have its little moment in the sun, which I'm sure will provide a lot of relief for a lot of people. Of course, if you haven't already been psychologically beat out of having exposure in ETH because of how rancid it's been over the course of the last 6 months or so. But they're the thoughts.